today, which would speak about what we are looking for when we speak about education today.
It was a warm spring morning down at Main Street schoolyard. Excitement was in the air. Hey, check this out, said Charlie. The school's Golden Places contest has been announced. Come on, let's go get our kits. And so the kits were handed out. Everyone identical. Everyone with a set of precise.
So I think you need to screen share that.
Each student set
Did
off
I
to
share?
work.
I didn't share it.
Charlie knew how to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll start from the beginning.
Yes, let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
It was a warm spring morning down at Main Street schoolyard. Excitement was in the air. Hey, check this out, said Charlie. The school's Golden Places contest has been announced. Come on, let's go get our kits. And so the kits were handed out. Everyone identical. Everyone with a set of precise instructions. Each student set off to work. Charlie knew how to follow directions. Great progress, and was quite proud of his work. Meanwhile, Maya was taking her time. She watched the world around her, noticing other ways things go places. The next morning, Charlie was finished and carefully inspected his work. But a noise interrupted his thoughts. Wow, said Charlie. What was that? You didn't follow the directions, did you? I started to, said Maya, but I wanted to try something different. Maya, what does that have to do with a go-kart? Asked Charlie. Who said it has to be a go-kart? Suddenly my project doesn't look very exciting. Oh, but you're a great builder, said Maya. Hey, maybe we should work together. And so they did. First, they compared notes. Charlie was good at details. Maya, good at dreaming up ideas. Each had a different approach to getting things done. Then they got to work. Side by side, they helped one another to build something new, something inspired, something spectacular. The next morning, everyone gathered for the final challenge, the big race. Each student stood alongside his or her finished project, each cart a perfect replica. Well, almost perfect. Ready? Asked Charlie. Ready as I'll ever be, said Maya. Some of the other students weren't so convinced. Ha! You may think you're going places, but you're just going to lose. Students, start your engines. On your mark. Get set. Charlie shouted, Maya, they're all ahead of us. What are we waiting for? No worries, said Maya. Flaps down, throttle up. Whoa, did you see that? And we have our winner. It was a warm spring morning down at Main Street schoolyard.
Okay, well, I'll start with my presentation. Before that, I hope the video was a glimpse on what we are actually looking at when we are talking about emerging trends in the 21st century education. Well, to start with, yeah. Now, the first thing that we speak about when we're talking about education is the global trends. What is education all about? It is preparing our students for the workforce. We need to prepare them for the future that they need to look at, for what they are actually developing their skills towards. In fact, this is something that would be very pertinent today when we even speak about the NEP that the government has come up with. The national education policy largely stresses on the requirement of the workforce, preparing the students for the future. Now, why do we feel at times our workforce today is unemployable? We often talk to people who are recruiting at the the starting level of any corporate, and we realize somewhere down the line the students that we have prepared for tomorrow are not unemployable, are not employable, for the reason that they are not equipped to face the real world challenges, to be somewhere presentable to for the requirement of the days to come. So where do we feel we are going wrong? Somewhere the emphasis larger is on the lower order thinking skills, that is in the process of remembering and understanding. Going back to your times of learning, most of y'all would have felt that somewhere the stress was on rote learning. We were made to remember things. We were made maximum the level that we reached or our education is stressed upon was understanding. But as an independent learner, with times we realize we need to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create as independent learners. We are not trained in the higher order learning skills. That is the Bloom's taxonomy, where we reach the higher order thinking skills from the lower order thinking skills. So, the end product of any educational journey has to end with creation. And into your classroom, you need to bring in this fact of creation to your learners. Moving to the next slide, what is the requirement for your students in the 21st century journey? First of all, is an attitude of building in yourself where you are ready to move in as a 21st century learner. Do we realize we have progressed far beyond technically into various modes where education is no longer something that you can derive from the books. So it is an attitude of learning that you need to create as a learner. Learn to know cognition, your mind. How much is your mind active in actually knowing what is happening? You have to build that questioning attitude in your students. In fact, I always believe somewhere students should have a very strong questioning attitude. How good is their question? That is important. It is not important how good are their answers, but how good are their questioning skills is very important. That is where it delves into their deeper knowledge. Learn to do. The skill-based learning that again NEP is propagating today. It's the skills and experiential learning where you prepare your learner to go into the lifelong journey, and he remains a learner for life. You need to remain relevant, as we were just now speaking about, continuously learning. You need to be a learner who wants to be passionate about learning. Why don't we create learning as a hobby? I often feel a hobby is something we all enjoy doing. So why not create learning as your hobby? And that is when a learner will be a lifelong student, which is important to face to the 21st century. Learn to choose and apply rightly. It is very important the assessments that you take, the assignments that you give, they are application based. Your learner has been taught a concept. You need to teach your learner how to apply the concept, to live together. We are social beings today, be it when we watch what is going on in Ukraine, we realize that we cannot remain devoid away from what is happening in the society elsewhere. So we all need to coexist together. It's a global world that we are facing. So your learner again needs to be a global learner. He needs to know about the world outside to live and exist in totality in a society. Learn to be existential. I exist in the present and I need to be a part and parcel of the world around me. So that is what a 21st century learner is looking for. And finally, his contributions to society. When we are talking about the global sustainable goals that we are speaking about. So it is the contribution that each of us is making in a very small way to the society, which will make them grow ahead. Now, finally, the need of today's hour. What do we require? We require a very holistic scenario where every child is provided that platform for all-round development. It cannot be just somewhere largely focusing only on the child's academic development. It has to be a all-round development. Preparing the individual to become global citizens. As I already mentioned, we can't be devoid of what's happening around the world. It's an age of digitalization where looking into or being aware of the digital content is very important. So your learner has to largely focus on digitalization, but again should also be aware of the negative aspects of this digital world. A personalized form of attention. Today, as a learner, I could be a visual learner. I learn better when I see. I could be a verbal learner. I am more vocal about my views, my ideas, my questions. I could be an auditory learner. I'm used to hearing. Or a kinesthetic, somebody who's bodily active. That is a reason a teaching, a classroom has to somewhere pertain to the learner ability, verbal, auditory, or kinesthetic. I generally stress upon doing your English activities or your the social studies activities or inquiry based learning through role plays, where I would insist that the teacher takes in a role play into the classroom, and especially for the younger learners, and the learners participate in this role play. So once you provide these forums to a learner, it becomes more easy for them to grasp a concept. Now, when we are speaking about digital content in education, by incorporating modern technologies like online assignments and video lectures, which was more pertinent during the pandemic times, we realized that we could not move into a physical mode. So it was hybrid model that we adapted. We moved into online assignments, video lectures, and provided study materials through the virtual platform as well. So it is the pandemic that has proved that the age of digital learning is very strong. It is in this forum that I often see the students who have been introverts, they come out in the open, they are ready to open up to their classmates, which often I have not witnessed during the physical classroom. You can have various web tools that you would be using. I'm sure during the pandemic, we have adopted to many of them, the message boards, the online lecture forums. Today, you have the Zoom, you have the Google Meets. There are various platforms that are available to you, and it can be taken over by the teacher as a classroom along with their students. So often I always encourage a blended mode of learning, like perhaps a Saturday where you generally don't, maybe the school is off. You try to blend in an online visual lecture as well with your students. or maybe you have a lot of syllabus, perhaps where we move into the higher education sector, we have a lot of syllabus to cover, and it is not always possible to do it in a physical mode. So it is always advisable to use the dual mode, move into a hybrid mode, given recordings to to your learners so that they can go through it even in their free times. Now, speaking about learning, we often adopt a different form of learning from the traditional classroom. The traditional classroom is a teacher taught method, a chalk and board method that we often use. But with the 21st century learner, you have to move far ahead, where the teacher now has to be a facilitator. He no longer can assume that the classroom is a teacher-centric classroom. Today, we have a classroom that is learner-centric. For this, my teachers often adopt the flipped classroom method. We put in the concept we throw the concept at the ball of our learners. The learners come in with a 360-degree approach towards that particular concept or topic, bring it into the classroom, and the teacher merely acts as a facilitator for the learning process to go on where students have actually brought in knowledge into the classroom. This can be done very extensively in the higher grades as well. Peer assessment. Peers are the best mode of learning when they assess each other. It is very important that you often delve into peer assessment because because using this mode of assessment, the learner actually understands his mistakes or where he has gone wrong or the pointers he has missed far better. It supports the development of critical thinking, interpersonal skills. How do you work as a team? The future calls, tomorrow's global world is all about working together. Today, if I'm facing you, I might not be seeing you across the screen. I don't know who you are, but yet I am reaching out to you. So it is very important that I reach out to my learners at every stage. It enhances understanding within the field of knowledge. It can be helpful in range of learning activities to critical and more public review. So today, as I move into a forum where I face people whom I personally do not know. So I have moved into a public review, a public format, like we also do when we use in social media. Often schools are using social media too strongly. I remember Doordarshan coming up with classes for the students in the rural settings. So somewhere these platforms let you reach out to your learners who are not visible to you or are not physically also connected to you. Promotes project management process and demonstration of leadership. So now finally, it gives the learner also the attitude of being a leader where he manages his entire learning process through projects. He is a master of his own work, which he's bringing into the classrooms. Okay. Now, collaboration, an essential skill for 21st century. As I have been talking about, the 4 important skills that you need as a 21st century learner will largely be communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. Now, let us talk about the first as critical thinking. Critical thinking is about solving your problems, how you need to train your learners to break a whole into small parts, and that the students discover the nature, functional, and relationships. So the first step to think critically is to learn to evaluate what you hear, what you read, and then decide to do. So as we were talking about the learner abilities, the learner in his critical thinking first decides that what he hears and what he reads, and then he decides his action. In fact, I would like to bring about a very interesting quote in this aspect by Paulo Coelho. Life is not about good answers, it is about interesting questions. As I was speaking, we need to teach our learners how to ask questions which are interesting, that actually bring about a series of learning. A question cannot be close ended, it has to be open ended, it has to trigger the curiosity of your learner. Now, speaking about creativity. Now, creativity teaches students to think outside the box. We do not want a typical humdrum rote learning learner. We want a learner who's going to face the outside world. And for that, we need to have him think out of the box. I can give an example where we in our school often do have entrepreneurial projects where children become entrepreneurs. They take up some kind of a project like making jewelry in the lower grades and selling it to their audience, maybe their parents. So they realize what marketing is all about, what customer requirement is all about. And these are small projects that you can somewhere take into the classroom. Now, speaking about collaboration, it shows students how to work together to achieve a common goal. The common goal is learning. The common goal is achieving or creating something. So once they collaborate as a team, that is when they achieve a common goal. It enables two or more students to connect and to link with their hearts and minds. They capitalize on one another's resources and skills. As we spoke about moving into the global world, we all need to pool in our resources and skills. And so finally, this kind of collaboration is what will help them achieve what they want to achieve. And the final product we are talking about, or the skill that is required, is communication. How you reach out to another being. That is very important. It lets students learn how to best convey their ideas. I always tell each and every person, today it's a day of marketing. If I cannot convey what I wish to communicate, then somewhere I do not reach out to the other person. So here also lies the various tools to aid communication. Technology is one of the most important roles in the field of communication. And the sooner we learn to handle it, or we are equipped to handle it, we are much better. Okay, now this is something that I discovered and introduced into my classrooms, is a self-organized learning environment, which was largely propagated by Professor Swagata Mitra when he realized that in Delhi, he introduced the PCs, the personal computers, to one of the slums, just put it into the wall and kept it there without any kind of support to the young children of that slum. And it was amazing to see that these children on their own, 6 months down the line, had picked up the entire functioning of the computer. Of course, internet services were provided, and they knew how to utilize this computer, utilize the virtual platform and the internet. So this is what is a self-organized learning environment that you need to create in your classrooms. I start with a small example where for grade 1, I put up this question: do you think the lion should be the king of the jungle? So now the classroom is moved into small groups where children brainstorm to understand the question, to find a solution to it, and to actually whether they actually believe in the lion being the king of the jungle. They many of them did feel that this was not right, but they had to give substantial evidence as to why they would like to refute the fact that the lion is the king of the jungle. So how do you do it? How do you bring a self-organized learning environment into your classroom? You first start with a big question designed to provoke curiosity in students and lead to more questions. Like I said, you put across a thought-provoking question to your learners, and now they provoke curiosity in their students, and this would lead to more questions. Next, you move on to investigate. The learners are now organized into small groups. They are collaborating with each other, which we realized was one of the important 21st century skills. And we use the internet to search answers. So finally, what happens is the review format. When each group presents these discoveries of theirs to their peers and to the classmates. Now coming to another 21st century mode that I feel should be introduced into a classroom is the disruptive classroom. It is something which we could not perhaps think when I started my career as an educationist, perhaps 25 years back. A classroom which is disruptive. We always thought of a traditional classroom where there were a proper, congenial, absolutely set environment with children concentrating fully. But today's 21st century learner has to be provoked to think out of the box, to think away from the humdrum mode of teacher taught method. So what do we want? We want an environment that would impact a change, who would bring about a different kind of an ideology into the classroom. We are referring to something that causes the kind of impact that leads to change. So it could be any kind of change process that you want to introduce into the classroom. Like I said, when I took up the project of a self-organized learning environment, I disrupted my entire classroom. I refuted what was actually strongly followed by the norm, that the lion, that is what we have taught our younger tiny tots at all times, that the lion is the king of the jungle. No. Now the child needs to think beyond, to understand and give a 360-degree evaluation to the understanding of that topic. This is what is finally going to lead to innovation, a personalized form of learning. Now, what are the various ways that you could invoke curiosity in your learner? First of all, learning, orientation, and analytical mindset. As I said, please do somewhere train your learners to become analytical in their thinking, not to merely understand what you are teaching, not to merely rote learn what has been told to them. Integration of data, communication, and technology. Solution orientation and problem solving. As we said, we need a 360-degree approach to problem solving. If you can introduce design thinking into your classroom, where the learner creates a prototype and then finds a solution to the problem. People and team orientation. Try to introduce more of team activities, team building activities in your classroom. Innovation and creativity, entrepreneurial orientation. As I said, let every child somewhere learn to become an entrepreneur for tomorrow. It is not necessary I need to always be selling products. I also sometimes need to sell my ideas. I need to speak about what I would like to have for myself, or what I would like the world to be. So that is a way of also being an entrepreneur with your ideas. Social sensitivity and cross-cultural orientation. You need to sensitize your children towards the social networking around them. You have to promote their sentiments into some kind of empathy for their fellow beings, be it human beings or even far beyond that, into the world of animals and living beings around them. A very multidisciplinary approach. Today, we have so many people who are today very much, they are highly acclaimed in their particular fields. Like I could talk about maybe A.R. Rahman in the field of music, Amitabh Bachchan in the field of acting. So how is it that there are two distinct ways, but yet they have carved a niche for themselves and been one of the most celebrated lot amongst all of their peers? That is because everybody has a multidisciplinary form of intelligence, that intelligence which caters to various forms. So you need to try and tap that intelligence in your learner and give it that kind of boost to work well with every child's aptitude. Managing self-awareness, self-development, including wellness. Today, it is very important that you also somewhere believe in the emotional quotient of a child. So it is very important that your learner is self-aware of himself. What is his strength? What is his weakness? And he works according to his understanding. Dealing with change and uncertainty. Every moment the pandemic has taught us it's a VUCA world, a world which is absolutely volatile and something which is ever use a strategy where we deal with our learners to be adaptable to any kind of changes that the that times might throw in front of them. Now, this is something that I found very interesting in one of my conferences, the fourth monkey. We often don't realize what we are speaking about. We often don't, we do not like hearing any evil. We do not want to see anything evil. We generally refrain from speaking anything evil. But most of us overlook the fact in today's day and date of posting evil to the world. We do not somewhere train our children to understand what they are reading, maybe a WhatsApp message, maybe something of something on Instagram, whether it is actually harming the society or it is required for the social platform. We need to let our learners become judges to understand what is right and what is wrong. So anything that is posted on a social media should not be believed. This is what you need to train tomorrow's generation all about. They need to understand whether what has been posted, they need to realize, they need to do some research to understand what has been posted is required or it is harming me or not. So it is very important that tomorrow's learners be well aware of the virtual space, the negativities of the virtual space, and how to be a smart internet user. This is what we need to train our students. Well, again, when we are speaking about technology, which we are using today, it's become a humdrum word with all of us. But let us realize technology can become the wings that will allow the educational world to fly farther and faster than ever before if we will allow it. So technology is going to take us a long way, but it is important as an end user to know how to be equipped to handle it. Okay, now it is with this kind of a format, I would quote some words here. Educators can leverage technology to create an engaging and personalized environment to meet the emerging educational needs of this generation. No longer does learning have to be one size fits all or confined to the classroom. The opportunities afforded by technology should be used to reimagine 21st century education, focusing on preparing students to be learners for life. As we spoke about in the very beginning, is a learner being passionate about learning, being a learner from life. Another thing that I want each of you all to go into is largely Jacopo Fresco's There is no way for you to make it on your own. Either we think globally or we perish individually. He's an individual who has written extensively about a global world and where we need to create a world without wars, a world where the barriers of being a different country or a continent should not be there. So I would largely request my learners to go into his ideas, and you will realize what kind of a world should we be creating, should we be looking at. Well, as I once did quote, emotional quotient today, I feel is a very strong point with our learners. Being self-aware, how to manage yourself, being socially competent with your peers, the relationships that you handle are very important. Finally, you could develop emotional intelligence in your learners through understanding emotions, using these emotions, managing your emotions, and finally, perceiving your emotions. So I would like to largely end by saying the 21st century learner today has innumerable skills that we need to try and instigate in our 21st century learners. So kindly, as an educationist, be aware of them, try to take it into your classroom or your teaching mode, and I wish you a very successful and a very happy journey, teaching and learning. I always believe a teacher is a lifelong learner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Suchita Malakar, for a very interesting talk. Thank you so much for your time. Let me just quickly check if there are any questions. We've got, I can see some questions. I'm just going to read out these questions to you, and you could just share your comments or thoughts on this. So we'll just go through this list quickly.
Yeah.
The first question is, please tell us about your education and career background, please.
It was an interesting question because my journey actually started into education somewhere by default, I can say. My husband's been an army officer in the past. So I moved into a remote location with him where they had a very small school, which was a fledgling primary school, which I hear today is actually moved into higher secondary. So how it works. And they wanted an English teacher there. And I had a little child back home, my elder son of 1.5 years. But the principal was imploring me that I join her, and I could bring my child along because they desperately needed an English teacher in that location. So that's how I actually moved into the profession of teaching. And to be honest, I would somewhere accept my children, my own children back home have been my best students, and I have learned all the nuances of teaching is back home. So I feel it starts when you start at a personal level. When you build a personal connect with your learner, the process of teaching becomes very simpler and much more enjoyable for you in your journey ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to the next question. Most schools teach for exams today. So given this, how to instill these new skills that you've talked about within that narrow confines of, teaching for an exam, end of the year, there's pressure. So within that whole treadmill of things, how do you kind of, get the teachers to focus on these very important points that you mentioned?
All I can say is, see, when I moved into Cambridge, I happened to be a principal with an IGCSE school. So when I moved into Cambridge somewhere, say 15 years back, I moved in from the national curriculum. So again, what you asked me at that time would have been actually a point of focus for me as well. But today, let me tell you, as I move into Cambridge and we largely work in a classroom environment with the way, as I have mentioned, what is required for a 21st century learner, I realize The syllabus is merely a mindset. It is a kind of a mental block that always, harps on us. Like, I'll just give you a small example. You want to take a chapter in history, which has a lot of maybe things. See, the national curriculum largely stresses on dates, the lineage of the kings, and that kind of thing. Say, supposing that's your curriculum, I would always suggest, why don't you look for a gallery walk? Believe me, it's only a 2 period requirement that you would have finished the entire chapter. Now, I'm sure most of you all know, but what a gallery walk is, you just create your corridor into the entire history coming alive. And the child just needs to move from one place, one of the scenes to the other, to understand what is happening during that era. And each child, maybe you divide them into groups, they explain what happened, what was the kind of social responsibility of the king at that time, what kind of a society did they follow. Somebody could speak about religion. So now let me tell you, within those 2 periods, you actually have covered the entire syllabus for that particular topic. So it's not so much of a actually barrier for you, but it is just that you need to get over that mental block, and you have to convince your seniors as well to take up your classroom mode in a very different way.
Right. Okay. Interesting ideas there. I've got a few other questions. Some are repeating, so let me just join a few up. So when you see the state of school education today, are you happy? Why? And if not, why not happy?
Undoubtedly, when I look at education today, we have moved far beyond what would have been my expectations, because I could never even think that today my children, my students are largely researching by themselves. Even my grade 1 students today are researching various topics and bringing content back home, back into the classroom. So we have moved far beyond technologically, and also when it comes to a mode of teaching. Today, I find teachers much more open to the idea of feedback from the students. Let me tell you, my classroom, my idea of an ideal classroom is where there is more of concepts that are coming in from the learner's side rather than from the teacher's side. And I really witness learners today who are well traveled, who are well, read, and who bring in a lot of knowledge into the classroom. So undoubtedly, it's a buzzing world today when it comes to a classroom space. But again, if you ask me, the learner attitude today, somewhere I feel has also, deteriorated with these. Today, the student is not, I won't say all of them, but many students are not receptive to knowledge that is coming from the teacher's end. So I feel we need to create that kind of a congenial space where both the transaction on both ways from the learners and the teachers is very amicable, and it's a very well thriving environment in the classroom. Yeah.
I've got a related question to that. So in this process, what can school heads do to encourage these efforts? So, I mean, as a head of a school, if you're looking at it, because you can make those policies and changes. So what are some things that you would suggest to another school head that they can do to bring about this change?
See, that's what I first, as a principal, I always feel the mindset has to change. You cannot somewhere feel that the old teacher taught method is right, the teacher centric approach is right. You have to start moving beyond it. And then, as I said, there are many ways of making a classroom a thriving environment for knowledge. Now, as an educator, I always feel any new idea that you get in, you must immediately take it into your classroom and implement it. As I said, when I took up this project of self-organized learning environment, I had an entire workshop with my teachers, and my teachers are well aware of the fact that somewhere let's not always take a spade as a spade. Let us bring in ideas that the children bring into the classroom, which might refute the normal set or the normal trend. Like there was a topic that we worked on was what would the world be? I would love to live in a world without coral reefs. So that set us thinking that how important are those coral reefs for the oceans? So we generally do not, these are topics that no student actually pays attention to. When I'm talking about global sustainability, the first things are I have to protect and protect my environment around me. And it starts with these small reasons, these small ideas. So somewhere we have to be open to implement these ideas into your classroom, like the design thinking attitude that I was talking about, design thinking project. Somewhere that is also very interesting. If you go in exactly how you can implement a design thinking project into your classroom, works very well with the higher grades in particular. And that is where the child, actually the learner, comes into questioning very, putting up good questions. That is what I would largely put across, is how do you put across good questions? The solution comes in later, but if your questioning attitude is good, you will derive the right solution at any point of time.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. I don't see any further questions. So with that said, we'll come to the end of this meeting, and we will be closing this meeting now. Again, on behalf of schoolreformer.com and School Journal of Education, we all like to thank Ms. Suchita Malakar for coming here and sharing her thoughts with us. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll leave the meeting.